setting up the meeting. It's doing all sorts of things.
All right. We made the technology work, everyone. Hello. So I am here today with two fabulous authors, one of whom I have had the privilege of editing, one of whom I have had the pleasure of reading. And we're going to have a great conversation today. I also want to say that I hope that if you're tuning into this, you spend some time later today, or have already spent some time, looking at all the fabulous videos that are up on this channel for the rest of the Juneteenth Book Fest. I've listened to 2 of them and I'm thoroughly in love, and there's so many more I get to listen to, so I'm very excited about that. So we're here today with Kay Ancrum and LL McKinney to have a conversation about Black speculative fiction and all of the overlaps that they share. So I'm going to take a minute to introduce our 2 lovely panelists. So LL McKinney is the author of A Blade So Black, A Dream So Dark, A Crown So Cursed, all books in a trilogy that is part of the Nightmareverse. She is an advocate for equality and inclusion in publishing. She's the creator of the hashtag What WOC Writers Here. She's the creator of the hashtag Publishing Paid Me. She's a gamer, a blurred, an adamant Hey Hey stan. She lives in Kansas City and spends her free time plagued by her cat. Let me see if I can do all this. Sir Chester, Fluffmeyer, Boopsnoot, Purrington, Wigglebottom, Flooferson III, Esquire, Baron O'Butterscotch, or hashtag Sir Chester for short. She's got an upcoming graphic novel from DC featuring Nubia, Wonder Woman's twin sister, which we're very excited about. And we've got more projects coming from her at Macmillan as well, so stay tuned. She's also writing for Serial Box, a Black Widow set of stories. And we're very excited to have her here with us today as she co-founded this festival. Say hello, Elle.
Hello, thank you so much. It's weird to hear everything that I am doing and will do out loud. I'm not overwhelmed. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Look, there is a lot of work to be done, and you are already well into the work of doing it. We're out here changing the world. It's all good.
Thank you.
So let me also then introduce Kay Ancrum. So Kayla, you will tell me if this bio is an out-of-date one. I'm gonna read it.
All right.
Tell me if it sounds bad. So Kay Ancrum is the author of The Wicker King and The Weight of the Stars. Here's The Wicker King. Yes. And The Weight of the Stars. Look at that cover. And she's got a couple more forthcoming books from us, one of which is called Darling, which we'll talk a little bit about today. She grew up in Chicago, Illinois, and she is all around amazing. She writes across what feels to me like across several different genres. She does speculative fiction, but it's part contemporary, it's part in your future, it's a little bit of everything. And she has a wonderful, imaginative, creative mind. Is there anything else you want me to throw in there, Kayla?
No, I think I'm good. I'm a newbie. This is only my 3rd book, and I'm just starting out, bread in my mouth, backpack on, super excited to be here.
I don't know if you can call you a newbie if you've done 2 books, but I mean,
the very first live, anything.
Mm-hmm.
Just excited.
Welcome.
We're very excited to have you. And we're so excited to have the 2 of you in conversation. So for just a little background here, this is a program by the Juneteenth Book Fest in concert with Imprint. Yes, it's an imprint called Imprint, and Macmillan. And we wanted to bring these 2 wonderful authors in conversation to talk about Black pride, Black craft, Black voices, Black writing, all of these great things. And I'm just excited to share the virtual stage with these two amazing women. So I figured we would dive in with some icebreaker questions. So we'll take fast answers to these ones, and then we'll ease into more of the meat of the conversation.
Works for me.
Yeah, and I know that if you have questions, we think we should be able to see them if you are commenting. So we'll try to gather those towards the end. So feel free to throw those into the chat. So let's start off with icebreakers. So we've all been hopefully quarantined or socially distanced over the past couple of months. So I'd like to know from each of you, what's your favorite indulgence while you've been, whether it's a show that you're binging, whether it's, a treat that you have to have, what are you using to get through this?
So I have done all the things. The last season of She-Ra happened, so yes. I binged that. I have been on Animal Crossing since it dropped. Pretty much every day. The last week, I've missed a few days, but things have just been really super busy. I have Final Fantasy VII, the remake. I have not cracked it open yet. That will probably happen after I turn in these here books at the end of the month, because I think I maybe want to stream my reactions to it as I'm going through the play along. So we'll see if I can manage to set that up without electrocuting myself, at least in my living room. We'll try it that way. And as far as indulgences, snack-wise, I've been crushing the Gushers. There are empty boxes and these little things just litter my couch and the area in front of it. And mostly because when I finish, I'll crumple it up and I'll throw it, and I'm entertained by my cat for about 15 minutes as he uses it as a toy. So that has been how I've been dealing with being shut in, which is stuff that I would have done normally. The Gushers, more than usual. I buy 5 boxes every couple of weeks now instead of just 2. So
2 out of 3 of the things that you've just described are ways I've been getting through. So I'm definitely, I may have been on Animal Crossing right before this. It's fine.
I'm not mad at it.
Kayla, what about you?
I've definitely been doing TV too. I've been doing this project where I go and I rewatch stuff that I only watched when I was a kid, because I want to kind of understand my taste level at the time. When you're a kid and you watch something, you're like, that's pretty good. Then you see it as an adult and you're like, no, it is not. So I'm trying to figure that. So I've watched Jackie Chan Adventures. I've rewatched the first couple Terminators, going back to some old animes like Ranma 1/2 and the old Dragon Ball Z, and I tried Trigun. It was terrible. It's very, very fun to see.
You've hurt Elle's entire feelings.
Accompany all of my old-timey and questionable taste television shows, I've been getting into luxury wines to kind of balance that out, trying some port, learning what that's like, learning about sherry and how that's different, kind of stuff like that.
Wow, that is amazing. That is a good balance of both, I would think.
I'm still stuck on this. Just gonna do my boy like that. Vash the Stampede's not out here making it, but okay.
He's iconic.
Okay, this is fine.
The pacing needs work.
This is okay. It's all right. We can still be friends.
All right. See, now you've I'm going to skip a question actually to get to the next one because it's so perfect. What are your favorite fandoms? What are you both into? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
The anime fandom is a big one. Sailor Moon. My top 3 anime, and usually Sailor Moon's at the top, and then the other 2 kind of juggle around. And then depending on if I, am feeling away, one of them might move to the top. But my top 3 are Sailor Moon, Gundam Wing, and The Gray Man, which if you haven't seen The Gray Man, it's about 104 episodes, at least until they caught up with the manga, and then that kept going. Then they redid it with new voice actors.
How was
And
that?
I'm old and I don't like when people change my things. But it's great. It's got demons that aren't demons. It's so weird, but I love it. Of course, your usual fandoms, Star Wars and whatnot. I've got Lord of the Rings weapons on my walls here, along with a plethora of other fandoms about The Office. So, but yeah, anime, video games, Black Panther with my little Black Panther thingy.
Yes.
Yes. My girls, stay here with me. So those are my big fandoms. And sirens, apparently. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't even hear it.
Gosh, it's so difficult because I read so much fan fiction that like I just have so much. Right now I'm super into Lord of the Rings. I'm very into like Sherlock Holmes, like old Sherlock Holmes and like Elementary. Anime, of course. Very, very interested in anime, specifically Clamp, because I'm super interested in like the difference between animes that are created by like women and what we design when we're fulfilling our own fantasies versus the animes that are designed and produced by men.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very into like rereading a lot of, let's see, I actually keep like here we go. I keep like a list on my phone. Super into Mad Max, super into Pacific Rim, kind of into Marvel. I recently restarted watching Supernatural. I had never seen the first couple of seasons. So it has the very like interesting effect of walking into a house party at like 2:00 in the morning where everyone's leaving and, you know, people are lying on the ground and there's just like stuff everywhere. And you're like, wow, okay. You know? So that's what I'm about right now.
Wow.
So first, the Trigun disrespect, and now sort of into Marvel. Sort of into, okay, this is all right. My feelings aren't hurt at all. It's okay. I'm fine. This is okay.
Oh my God.
I'm upset in the least. No, this is okay.
She's still stuck on the Marvel one. My goodness.
So I have like
I heard the rest of them, but
aggressive preference for like very specific movies. Like I'm like Die Hard, Winter Soldier, Die Hard, Thor, but only the third one, Die Hard, Spider-Man for all of time, you know, but then something's like Iron Man and I'm like, okay. Like, I love Black Widow. Just everything about her is incredible. Like,
so well,
yeah, I love her.
I have to send you a link for the thing that I did.
See, we're all on the same page. We just like different parts of different things, or you know,
diversity.
Yes, it's all good. All right, so we talked about fandoms. What's the last book that you read and enjoyed?
I'm gonna have Legendborn. I read Legendborn. I'm so excited. This book, like I cannot contain myself. This book, it's so Black. It's so like fantastical. The characters, I just, Tracy Dion did that. She did that. Today is her birthday. She's Gucci baby. Happy birthday, Tracy. Go everybody and pre-order Legend. Like, just do it for yourselves. Honestly, if you need a selfish reason, go do it for you. But that's the last thing I read for pleasure. Well, I guess technically I read it to blurb it, but it turned into a pleasure read real quick. Like 2 pages in, I was like, oh, I'm supposed to be, this is homework. I don't care.
Excellent.
I'm actually like a weird period in my like reading history. I kind of take breaks from reading to do research when I'm preparing to write books. So the last book I read was like early this year, and it was the book Pet. I was at a children's conference, and they were doing that thing where they like present a bunch of books to you in like a really long 30-minute, you know, presentation. And I was just kind of like, you know, dozing off during it and stuff like that. And they started describing Pet, and I was like, wait. And I just ran to the bookstore afterwards and like bought a copy before all of them were sold out. It was incredible. And it's very much one of those books that makes you understand that writing for children between the ages of like 9 and 14 is such an advanced skill, and that there's so much that goes into creating work for them that really, makes them love reading while at the same time giving them the lessons that they, desperately need to thrive, is very, very special. And I hope one day that I'll be a good enough writer to write middle grade.
Ooh, that would be very exciting. Both of those books are books I'm really looking forward to reading at some point. So that's excellent. All right, I feel like the ice is well and broken. So let's get into this.
Yes.
When did you each realize you first wanted to be a writer?
I have always told stories. You ask a lot of writers are like, I have always written. And it's like, well, no, I started out with like very crudely drawn things with crayons. And then eventually advanced to words. And I've done it for as long as I can remember, which is the cliche. Then in high school, my freshman year, I used to finish my work early. And I had a teacher, my English teacher, of all the teachers, told my parents that writing is a distraction for Latrice and she should stop.
Mm.
And my parents, like me and my sisters have always had difficulties in various iterations in school because especially back in like the late 80s, early 90s, and still now, it's just well documented now because social media exists. People don't like smart Black girls, and we were very intelligent. So I had a second grade teacher who tried to tell my mom I didn't know how to read. That's why I was getting bad grades. That's why she was writing me up. And I was going to the principal's office. I didn't understand why this was happening. And then my mom pulled both me and my sister not out of the class, but out of the entire school and put us somewhere else because of that administration in that school. Mm-hmm. And so then it happened again in high school, and my parents, who were supportive, were like, just don't do it in her class, or, just sort of maybe sort of tone it down a little bit around that teacher in particular, just so you don't have any problems. Because back then you didn't have a way for it to go viral and for the school to be held accountable, So I didn't write again until college. And I wrote in college, and because of spite, and I'm more and more comfortable with telling how it happened. Twilight happened, and I started reading it. I got to like page 99, and I was like, okay, I can't do this. No shade to anybody who enjoys Twilight at all. We all have our, own personal taste. And then I was like, let me try the movie. And then the movie happened. And then the world exploded with vampires. I don't think they count, but whatever. And I was like, you know what? If she can do it, I can do it. Like, that is literally what got me back into writing towards publication. And that was about 10, 12 years ago. So there was a stint for about 5 or 6 years where I didn't write because an authoritative person in my life told me that it was a distraction because she didn't like the fact that I finished my work ahead of everybody else and had time to do my own thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's really difficult. I'm really sorry.
Racist teachers, man. Racist teachers. They exist. Teachers are great, but just like everybody else, every other group, y'all got some bad apples.
Wow. Yes. All right. Kayla, can you follow that up?
Yeah, mine is way less, difficult. But I started writing when I was maybe 12 or 13. And I was really into like fantasy kind of books because I was really into mythology at the time. And one of the things that like I've always had that whenever I talk to any other authors about, they're like, why, that's weird that you feel that way about that. But I've always been super, super open about sharing my work. and getting feedback, regardless of whether it was like positive or negative. So I was like 12 or 13 and like forcing all of my little 7th grade friends to read my horrible books. And they were just like, please stop. And I was like, no. And like, it was very, very, you know, much like a community kind of environment for me with that. So I didn't really have any interactions with any adults who were particularly interested in nurturing or caring about that until I was in high school. And then when I was in high school, I started writing something that people thought was actually good. I mean, it wasn't, because I've read it, you know, more recently. It's terrible. Like, but I was writing a thriller novel about a girl who runs away from home and gets picked up by the mob. And because she's like, you know, very, very young, I think she was 15 and blonde and whatever, that they decide to make her a, like a, what is it? When they sell people to kill people, but for money, what is that called?
Assassins?
There we go, assassin.
Okay, I was like,
so it was about
the word that I'm thinking of.
Yes. Sorry. But yeah, so I wrote a book about you know, an assassin. And it was just about her training and her doing this and people underestimating her. And I did a bunch of research on how to surreptitiously kill people. And then I was like, okay, well, this is like 125,000 words. Maybe I'll have my teacher see it. And if she likes it, then maybe I'll like fix it up and share it with my friends, because I actually want them to read something of mine that's really good. And I had this teacher who wasn't racist, but who was very homophobic. And I had a character in there that, you know, was in a relationship with another guy, and she just like berated me about it for the entire rest of the school year. And I was just like, okay, you know, there are some people I can share my work with, and there are some people that I cannot share my work with, you know? Oh, actually, did she get kicked out of the?
She's coming back.
Okay. All right.
Zoom is on one, I tell you. As she's coming in, I have a question.
Sure.
How many words did you say that you wrote for this story?
125,000 words, but in my defense, I did no homework that year. Like, I had terrible grades. Like,
How old?
16. But again,
Okay.
no bills that year.
Okay. I heard that, and for some reason in my mind, I heard 6. So I was like, wait. Okay, no, that's fine. No, okay. I brought it back. I was like, who is this wonderkind? Like, what? How? Okay.
Yeah, it was, I didn't do any after school programs. I didn't really have any responsibilities. So in my defense, I don't think I have ever written that much for one project as an adult, you know? That's just
something you got to defend. That's amazing.
Thank you.
That is amazing.
But yeah, and then the entire like my journey from just doing writing for fun and sharing it with my friends to actually like, you know, doing it for real was when I was in college, also not doing any homework. I would write on Tumblr, and I would like post like a novel that I was writing so that I could write it during class on my phone. And like I wasn't really posting it for anybody but myself. I was just kind of like, oh, I just want to have this so I can continue the story. And people started being interested in it and like finding it out of nowhere and messaging me about it. And this agent, whose name, like, I can't find her information anymore, she contacted me and she was like, hey, first things first, before you get excited, I will never be your agent. I only represent celebrity memoirs and cookbooks, okay? But I think that you have something good. I think that you should try to apply to other people. I will give you a recommendation if you can. I just don't represent the work that you do. But if I did, I would snap you up in an instant. And I was like, wow, okay. So I, you know, decided to pitch my book that wound up never getting picked up, and just having like somebody from that industry come in, and instead of kind of like, you know, giving me any, you know, promises or anything like that, just kind of saying like, regardless of whether you're writing this book or regardless of, you know, what work you work on, I think that you personally have what it takes to make it to where I've seen other people get. And kind of hearing that, you know, from somebody's, I think she ran like a teen wolf blog on Tumblr for fun, but she was
I forget Teen Wolf exists every now and then. It just leaves.
I have so many feelings about that show. Such a missed opportunity. Started so strong, ended so weak.
That's amazing. Oh my goodness. So I did fall out for a minute, so forgive me if this has already been answered, but I'm curious, when did you each decide to write for teens?
That was the,
yeah.
go ahead.
Actually,
Go.
because it's really fast. I decided to write for teens because I was a teen, and I was like, okay, well, I don't know what adults are doing or what they think about, so I'll just write for teens. I'm not a kid anymore, so I don't want to write about kid stuff. I want to write about like young adults because I was like 19. So that was mine.
I decided to do, because that's what I loved reading back when I was told to stop doing the writing thing. And those are the stories that I connected with. Because adult books, unless they were like super fantasy or like The Mummy, which I read in 8th grade, Anne Rice's The Mummy. I don't know how it was in my 8th grade library, but it was, and it should not have been, I will say, looking back on it. But it was always something fantastical. So I was bored by adult books because they wanted to solve murders and argue with each other, and that was it. Like, and murders need solving, don't get me wrong, but it was just boring.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, loving science fiction and fantasy and not really seeing people, who look like us on the covers unless we were the sassy, sidekick or the person being murdered for the solving of the crime. Or we probably weren't even there to begin with. So my sister started having kids, and I decided that they weren't going to go through the same drought of representation that I went through. There would be at least one book that would have somebody on the cover, with dark skin and natural hair. Now there are 3 that I have contributed. 4, yes. I'm very proud of that. And, it's gotten a lot better. It still has much, much further to go. People like to pat themselves on the back with, the fact that we've clawed and kicked our way this far, and everyone watching us do it is like, good job, publishing. It's like, no, good job, these people. Y'all need to get your act together. The rest of you watching us struggle to do this. Because if we're being honest, everybody else needs to sit down for like a good decade and just let us do what we're gonna do if we're ever gonna, get to this point. I used in another panel, if you have somebody who's trying to race and you want the race to be fair and this person's been held back, well, you can't just let them start running and you keep running. You got to stop and let them catch up. Then it's a fair race from that point. So yeah, like that's why I decided to write for kids, because the first 3 books that I did write that will probably never see the light of day were all about white boys, because that's what I thought you had to write to be published, because that's all I read. And I decided to let myself be the hero and my babies to be the heroes of stories. I was going to show them that this is theirs. They can come and take it. Come and take it. It's yours.
So you wrote 3 books before you got to Blades of Black.
I want to say 4, but one was technically Power Ranger fan fiction when I was 12, and I had no idea that that's what that was.
Look, if you wrote a completed fanfic, if you wrote a completed fan fiction, I think that counts, because I've written fan fiction and like getting it finished is like a whole thing. So
that's the thing is it technically wasn't fanfic because it was about these people in space who could transform into these colorful outfits, but I didn't call them Power Rangers and it was all original characters. But it wouldn't fly. Like there would be some copyright lawyers out there going, are you sure? But that was the very, very first foray into writing. I was like 12 or something like that. I don't know. I didn't know better. But yeah, 3 books before A Blaze So Black were all white boys.
Wow.
I mean, there were Black characters in there. I regulated myself to being a sidekick because that's what I was taught. And I think it's important for people to understand that we drink this Kool-Aid too, and if it can affect us, you are not immune in the least.
Kayla, how many books did you, if any, did you write before you got to the first book you sold, before the first book that you got an agent for?
Definitely just 2. I was, or like 2 I completed. I was doing this thing around after I had like a confrontation with one of my teachers about the assassin thriller that I was writing, where I was like, okay, I need to teach myself how to write, different types of books. I need to teach myself about dialogue. I need to teach myself about space. I need to teach writing within a space. I need to teach myself about, the emotional journey of a reader. So I started working on these mini projects to specifically teach myself certain things. Mm-hmm. And the one that I was working on when I was on Tumblr was a book where I was trying to write without including description. And it was called Red and the Bomb. And it was a book about a kid who grows up to be a dictator, but it was about him being a teenager and seeing all the facets of him that eventually grows into this monstrous man that he becomes. Mm-hmm. So I would do something where instead of being like, he walked into the kitchen and grabbed a cup of coffee and like drank it or something like that, I would have it be something where it was like, can you grab me that thing over there? He said, putting his cup on the table. And now you know that he's in the kitchen and that he was drinking coffee. So I had like an entire, like super, like very, very tightly written book like that. And I was pitching it around, and the general reception of it was that it was really, really interesting, but intensely unmarketable. And they were just like, this is a really good book. I wouldn't know how to sell it. And if I don't know how to sell it, then they won't know how to sell it to their readers. And if they don't know how to sell it to their readers, the acquisition team will never make it happen. So it was, kind of bad. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to take all the things that I enjoy from this first book that I wrote, and I'm going to write a marketable book that has all of the stuff that I wanted. And I, brought over different types of characters, brought over relationship dynamics, and just brought over everything and wrote The Wicker King and was like, you like this one now? You want to mark it? And they were
Defiance.
Just, okay, that'll do. So that's, the one that I had before that, but just the two.
Wow. That's kind of amazing that you were able to see. I like to tell people that no writing work is ever wasted, because even if you don't end up using it, like you're learning things from it, whether it's about the industry or about, your own craft. But that's amazing that you were able to like take so much of, what you loved about that and bring it into something else. So
yeah, I wouldn't have been able to write Alice if I hadn't written those 3 books. Mm-hmm. Probably also the Power Ranger one beforehand.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we're about halfway through. I want to get to craft, but I did have one other question for you quickly, which was, and Kayla sort of started to address this, but how did you get your foot in the door of publishing, for anyone who's watching, who's trying to get there?
It's been so long. Since I literally started, like I finished the first of those 3, I'm just going to call them the white boy books. Of those 3 white boy books, I finished the first one and I started trying to get published, querying agents, so forth and so on. Mm-hmm. And in the process, while I was querying that one, I was writing the other one. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. And then got an agent. That agent left the business, went back into it. While I was querying the second one, started writing the third one. Got another agent with Alice after I wrote 2 books in there when I should have said the third one. So I wrote 2 books during the span of querying, because again, 5 years doing this, more than that, honestly. And then I wrote Alice, and I started querying Alice because interest in the other book that I had written had started to die down, and got an agent with Alice. We were on submission for 2 years. And so I see a lot of people who they're watching what's happening on Twitter, and you see people get the deal 2 months, 2 weeks or whatever. Y'all, 2 years we were out there, and I'm not even, I'm still on the short end of that. There are people who've been on submission trying to sell a book for over a decade, same book, but each time, I finished one, I didn't stay focused on it exactly. I was always working on the next book. And I tell people that the agent who sold my book wasn't even an agent when I started first querying. And the editor who acquired my book wasn't an editor when we first went out on submission. So, just sticking in there, sticking with your guns is really important. But I stopped counting query rejections at 250. So I'm sure I was somewhere, and that was a couple of years before I got representation for Alice. So, and that's not even counting the rejections from being on submission. So I'm pretty certain that I'm somewhere in the 300 range when it comes to how many times I've been rejected. But I had people in my corner, both in my personal life and in, my writing life. Find your people, find your family within the industry, people who are going to understand what it's like, people who are going to understand what you're talking about. Because my family, while they get that I'm frustrated, they don't understand this particular type of frustration. And I surrounded myself with Black people as well. Like I had various writers groups. I had good friends from all walks. And then I had my circle of sisters as well. Because sometimes there's things that you got to go to the circle of sisters with that you can't go nowhere else with.
Yes.
Because sometimes certain things just hit right. You want to do that gut check. You're like, am I just being sensitive? Or is this rejection really racist? Because you had to deal with that as well. So that was my story. And again, I started doing this back in like 2005. I got agented in like 2014, late 2014, early 2015. And then the book sold in 2016. So late 2016. So that was my journey. And it was all cold querying. And like online contests are great. Twitter pitch things are great. All of that is great, but cold querying works too.
Yeah, I got mine through cold querying as well. I did something kind of, I don't know, very Slytherin. I had this book and I was, very excited to share it with the world and everything. And I think I queried like really hook people. Usually if somebody, got, a couple of pages or something like that, they were relatively interested. But if you can't get people past that first paragraph of an opening, then you can't really get them at all. And I kind of really isolated that was something that I was just like really struggling with. So I posted an ad on Craigslist New York, even though I live in Chicago. And I, said, I have a 1-page query letter. I will pay anybody who works in the industry $50 to edit it. And I got a bunch of people kind of came out of the woodwork like, oh, I'm a retired agent. I'm a current agent. I need some money, that kind of environment. And I picked 6 who were all super nice, amazing women. And I gave the letter to one. She edited it, gave it back to me. And I took the edited letter, gave it to the other one. She edited it, gave it back to me. Then I took it, gave it to the next one until I was finished. And I had it edited by 6 different agents who basically, together with the power of them, crafted the most seductive query letter that they could. And then
agents by your power combined. Like that is what I'm hearing here.
And then I turned to my dream agent, who is Amy Tipton, who recently retired. And I was like, here. and she was like, okay, all right. I see you got some potential. And then she actually had me wait until I was finished with The Wicker King, because I would think I was like in the middle of finishing it up, and she was like, if that's good, then I'll represent it. And she decided that I was worth the chance. The Wicker King is like a really strange book. I don't know how many people have read it, but it's written really strangely. It has chapters that are literally just 1 page long. And it also has like a bunch of, let me see if I can hold it well to flip it. It has like a bunch of like art and pictures, and the pages change colors. It's just like very much a mixed media book, kind of like the Illuminae files. So it was very much like a risky investment property, so much as we look at our books as products. I queried, it was on submission for about a year. People just didn't want to touch it. It was too weird. It's dark. It's not like a cozy, LGBT story. It's like a story about, like mental illness that happens to have LGBT characters. So it can't be pitched as like an issues book in the way that they usually market that. I have one really, really notable rejection that I'm like kind of excited about, that it was, what's his name? David Levithan. David Levithan read it and he was like, oh, there's too much swearing or something. It needs to be cleaner. And I cleaned it up and he was like, no. But I was so excited that he had like read it at all. I was like, I love your work. And my agent's like, no, you're supposed to be mad at him. And I was like, I love you. It was a mess. But last that year, I think Aaron, who had just started Imprint, picked it up, and she was so excited about it. And I really felt like I was being seen as a creator, and that the things about me that were like weird and off-putting could also be like sparkly and marketable and all that stuff. So it was a strange kind of environment where I never really felt like I was going to, belong. And by doing the right thing, standing in the right place and waiting for the right time, it kind of like fell into place a little bit. It's not nearly as much of a Cinderella story as it sounds, because I did have to put in copious amounts of labor and do copious amounts of editing and, really, 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 really get lucky with somebody who wanted to start their imprint off with a bang. But that's how I got to where I am.
So when I say I've had the pleasure of encountering your books as a reader, what I actually mean is when I was trying to figure out if I wanted to join Imprint, I did a lot of research, and your book, Wicker King, was one of the first books that I read. And I was just, I was like, this is fascinating. I didn't know you could do this. And like, that was very exciting. Excuse if you can hear the rain, phone, I'm sorry about it.
I turned a second ago. I don't know if people could or could not hear it, but Chester did that thing where he's like that gif of "let me in," like that's him right now. He's so upset. He's so upset. He's gonna tell Danielle on me as soon as I'm done here.
Oh man! All right, so let's get into craft stuff. Where do your ideas come from? I know it's a big question, but like, how do you keep creativity flowing? Like, because first of all, you both talked about having written books before you even got to the ones that got published. So I know you have ideas for days. And then second of all, I've seen Elle's Twitter, and I see that like I'm over here waiting for the next draft, and she's like, I'm gonna write this book. And I'm like, oh my goodness, yes, let's do all of those things. Like
all the things. I like what ifs. What ifs drive my books, because like, what if this happened? And if I think it's cool and the idea sticks around long enough that I start to solve the what if, then I'm on board. Like for Alice specifically, that I love telling the story. I was sitting on my mom's couch watching Supernatural reruns. This was back before we had, I don't know, season 93. I think this was like during the original 5, I'm sure, which are the best 5, and you can fight me on it. But hey, it should have stopped at 5. We could have all been sad and in our feelings about it, and we would have recovered. Like those other, 9 seasons didn't need to happen, but whatever. Mm-hmm. So I'm watching Supernatural reruns, and they're hunting their freakish version of vampires, and they made a Buffy reference. Well, earlier that day, Disney had announced that they were going to do the Tim Burton live action, and my original reaction to learning about the live action Alice in Wonderland was, nobody asked for this. And then my second reaction was, okay, so if Alice in Wonderland is real, because live action, and it's not some little girl's acid trip, then that means stuff like the Bandersnatch is real, the Jabberwocky is real, so how do you deal with those things? And will it be set modern times? Does that mean, what is that going to look like? What if, it was a world you could go to and interact with, and you had to fight off the Jabberwocky? It means you're going to need a sword. So I wrote a fight scene, and I liked it. I'm pretty good at fight scenes, I like to say. And I kept going, and I wrote another fight scene. And Alice was there from the start. And then Hada drops in, and she's just annoyed with him. And their chemistry is immediately there. And I'm like, I want to see more of this. I want to see where this goes. And so the world widened from their very first interaction, which most of it made it into book 1. We see most of them after the 1-year jump in the story, where Alice is being bait, and she thinks that Hada is a jerk for suggesting this, but then it works, and then she's salty about it because he was right. So that sort of happened because of that. And the other books that I've written, Nubia happened because, I had tweeted, I want to write Young Justice, and a DC executive slid into my DMs and was like, let's talk. So I pitched Young Justice, and I was like, you know what? My girl Nubia has been done dirty for too long. What if this is my way of getting her back into the canon? And so I pitched Nubia as part of the Young Justice team. She was a teenager. The reasons for that are explained in the book. Pre-order it if you want to find out how I managed this out, because yes, she still is Wonder Woman's twin sister. And so they were like, we like this, but we like this more. Can you focus on Nubia? And I was like, I will absolutely focus on Nubia. You want me to bring the Black girl front and center? Yeah, when do I get started? So that all of my stuff start as what ifs. There's one story, it's like, what if Chicago was a hotbed for these creatures called Pandorans, which is our version of werewolves and fae and lycans, because I have more than just, werewolves. I have cat lycanthropes as well, and jackals and hyenas and tigers and bears. And they're all Pandorans because there's this gateway called Pandora's box, and that's how they do the thing. And I don't want to give too much away for that in case it becomes a thing. So it's always just what if. What if after the battle between heaven and hell, heaven's like, all right, everybody who's not in the house, when the porch lights come on, you're stuck on earth. So, this legion of angels just gets like cut down, but they're not demons. So it's always just what if. So that's how I do ideas. And they pop up randomly, like you said, on my Twitter feed. And I'll stop talking now because I've gone on for like 5 minutes.
I can't with you describing things that like we haven't even contracted yet. How dare you, ma'am?
I'm like
getting me all excited.
I see, and I go to Twitter because I'm like, would this be? Let me. Okay. Let me go and do something with this then.
All right, Kayla, you take your minutes. Go.
I get really obsessed with kind of cerebral concepts that I want to illustrate in firmer, like a firmer kind of place that people can live in, as new agey as that sounds. I like for things like recently I was very obsessed with the idea of time, of love as a symptom of time, and in order to illustrate that concept and the richness of the idea of human connection between people being something that can be built just by proximity. I'm writing a story about immortality and what it means to be, alone with somebody else and the only people existing within a certain time stream that's so extended that you're basically alone just with them. For The Wicker King, I was very, very obsessed with the idea of being able to connect with people without having all of the faculties that one would traditionally use for that. So, the relationship between Jack and August being so fractured by their environment, by neglect, but them having the one thing that the other person needs, which is the desire to be a family and to have a family and to be taken care of in whatever destructive ways that they eventually figured out to do. And I was very, very obsessed with that. For my book about the kid who grows up to be a dictator, I was very obsessed with the idea that everybody starts out as clay and some people become bowls and cups and plates and other people just become shards. And I wanted to illustrate that concept. I had a book that Imprint rejected.
How dare we?
Oh.
No, it's totally, I understand why, it makes sense and you will too. But it was a book about a kid who makes a deal with the Crossroads demon, and the demon possesses him, and they have this horror comedy where they're just kind of fighting over the use of his body, and then over time through proximity they fall in love with each other, and he's a couple, but in one body. And that was to illustrate the idea that being loved is being known. And that when somebody can see all of what you are and doesn't say like, I love you despite all of your pain, your problems and whatever, and instead just looks at what you have and is like, that's okay, that's fine. That is the meaning of true love. And like, whenever I hinge on something like that, I'm like, I want to teach, children about, doing this or feeling this feeling, or, very much kind of, bringing to them an understanding of an emotion that they don't really have words for yet. And then I'll craft whatever narrative needs to exist in order to fully illustrate that in the richness of whatever concept it is.
Oh, wow. Dang, we went deep with it. Okay.
Hey.
All right. Again, you're making me skip a question to go to another question because now it's segued in. It's fine. We're going to do it. So I want to talk about writing romances, whether you're writing, a story that is objectively a romance, or writing, a story that just has romance in it, as a lot of YA does. So I wanted to ask about what tools and techniques you use to write romances and stories, but also what additional considerations you encounter when you're writing queer romance specifically. So, run with it.
So I'm going to be honest, for my romances, I have a writer's group, and there is an author. Her name is Natasha Hanova. Her work is amazing. I really enjoy it. She is my romance person because I understand that human beings have feelings, and sometimes those feelings like intermingle and we care about each other and it gets messy because people are messy. But I was always that person who read and I was like, and they're kissing. All right, back to the story. Like that was me. I got better at it as I got older, but Natasha is really the one who would, push me. She would be like, and what does she feel about that? No, not what does she like physically feel? What are her emotions? And I'm like, do the thing. Like she wouldn't not let me do it. So that's how I started with romance. Now I'm a bit better at it. And for queer romance with Alice, I didn't want it to be this focused thing. I didn't want her to sit there and be like, oh my gosh, is this somehow different than how I feel for him when I'm feeling it for her? Because in book 2, Alice, I mean, it happens in book 1 as well, but not to the extent of in book 2. Alice sees a couple of girls and she's like, well, okay. So it just is. And it's just as intense, and it's just as, she's just as embarrassed, that she might be making a complete fool of herself in front of somebody who she thinks is cute. And like, there's no real difference for her, and that just makes her be able to exist and to have these feelings without some sort of outside force questioning it and holding up a magnifying glass to make sure that this box is checked or that box is checked. So I'm just allowing her and the other people in the stories as well. But I mostly focus on her because we're in her head, for it to be people talk about their past relationships and who they were with, and you don't get that, wait, I didn't get that vibe from you type situation, which happens. Or, oh, I only got this type of vibe from you. Now this is interesting. So she's not a case study in queer love. She's just queer and in love.
Oh,
I like that.
Heart. That was such a good line. I'm like, yes, she is. Okay. All right. I'm obsessed with the concept of intimacy. Like, love's like made of a bunch of stuff, but like intimacy has always been something that I've just been like, okay, this is, the bedrock of humanity, regardless of orientation, regardless of that, like having the ability to create that closeness, I guess. So a lot of my romances are built on developing intimacy or showcasing types of intimacy. So it's very important to me to showcase characters doing like acts of care, having very like tender scenes where people are cooking for each other, or, you know, worrying about each other or defending each other and stuff like that. Physical intimacy of my characters is something that a lot of my readers talk about, how they touch each other, how a lot of my characters will like just put an arm around somebody else, or, you know, speak to them in whispers, or, you know, just have like a really tender physical gesture that they have with that person. And the thing that I'm like really, really into is kind of like slow burning that, you know, silent gestures of intimacy until you hit like the actual confession, big romantic moment, or what have you. Because I think that when people are acting like they're in love, but not talking about love, it has this kind of like this gay je ne sais quoi, like the full pure history of our, you know, LGBTQ culture of loving in whispers and loving in gestures and glances is like very, very deeply a part of the way that I write romance. And then another thing that's really important to my development of, you know, characters is loneliness. I'm very much like an inherently lonely person. I'm lonely like in parties, I'm lonely in relationships, I'm lonely all the time, because it is in some ways more instinctive for me to view love through a shadow box than to exist inside of it in some ways. And I think that when I'm talking about loneliness and being like lonely among others, as like a bedrock for kind of like discussion about romance and having a partner and having a companion and having a family, it rings really deeply for the people who choose to read my work. Largely in part of loneliness being something that a lot of people consider to be kind of embarrassing and private, and B, because loneliness is endemic within the LGBT community, that I think that it's important to have characters that do struggle with feeling that type of isolation before they get the community that they deserve, you know?
I really like what you said about intimacy, and it ties in a lot, I think, with, in just like having this epiphany as you are speaking, which is what good work will do, is you'll realize things as you're talking. How, you know, there's this what's going on within the LGBT community, and it's like, but also with this thing, you know, with this idea of not being like Black girls don't deserve love,
Yeah.
and don't deserve to be treated to that intimacy that you were talking about. They don't deserve to be taken care of in the ways that you were describing, like with the cooking and like the little gestures. And I'm just like, that right there is another thing that I'm hoping shows up a little bit more, is that we deserve all of that, just as you were talking about. And yeah, mutual fangirling is what I saw in the thing. And it is a mutual fangirl situation here, because that just as you were discussing, I was like, that is a thing that should be pointed out. Yes.
Wow. All right, well, we're coming up on the 1 hour mark, and I have other questions we can tackle, but I also wanted to give us a chance to check and see if other people had questions for us.
Yes, I can. Like, if you've seen me going down, like every time I look, it's because I'm going and checking the chat to see if there were any questions. So if anybody does have any questions, and also because I'm grown and I do what I want and I can control this, we could go past the 1 hour mark if we need to a little bit. I don't think that YouTube will kick us off the same way that Instagram's kicked us off. So if anybody does have any questions on the YouTube chat, feel free to throw them at us. I haven't seen any, with the exception of the one that we kind of answered early on. So we'll give folks a chance to type in. We can answer one more question, and if no other questions are up, then we can do whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I'll go back to the one I skipped over. How about that?
That works for me. I'll keep an eye on the question box.
Okay. So, you know, I wanted to talk a little bit. This question is going to pertain, Caleb, for you more to the work that you have recently written and is not yet published. So we're talking here about some people call them retellings. You know, I've heard you refer to it as a reimagining. I've heard other people call it a remix. When you're taking a story that, you know, is drawing inspiration from an original work. So in Elle's case, we're talking about Alice in Wonderland, right? With you know, hints of Buffy. And in Kayla's case, we're talking her newest book, Darling, takes inspiration from Peter Pan in a really interesting way. And so I guess what I want to know is what inspired you each to take on these particular stories and then to remix or reimagine them in the way that you did.
Actually, Peter Pan has been one that I've been saving for a little while. I'm a plotter, so I'll like write down stuff. So I plotted out Darling in like 2014, which was so long ago. It was way before The Way of the Stars. But the book of Peter Pan is really, really interesting because it was written to be perceived in two different ways by readers. By children, it's meant to be perceived as like an adventure story with like romance and swashbuckling and magic and all that stuff. But it is specifically written for adults to see certain things about Peter and the world around them and the danger that the children are in at the same time as the kids are seeing something else. So I think I first read Peter Pan when I was like, I don't know, in middle school or something like that. And I was like, this book is okay. Like, I forget what I was reading. I think I was reading like sandwiched it between like A Wrinkle in Time and like the fourth what is it, Harry Potter book or something. And I was like, this book is like average. Like I'm not really compelled. And then when I reread it again in college, I was just like holding it and just screaming, just like, how could I have not seen the value and the, you know, everything in this? And like, there's this really interesting thing that just goes over the head of everybody. And Disney, by the way, did an amazing adaptation because they did a purely from the children's point of view adaptation. But if you like read the book and then rewatch it, you're like, oh, they kept in, you know, stuff. But Peter Pan is violent, a murderer, super racist, and makes all of the children uncomfortable. And like, there are these books where Peter's doing something and it's like Wendy looked at, you know, her siblings with mild horror and then chuckled anxiously like, okay. And then I think there's the perfect scene with the indigenous characters in the book and he says something and like everybody like together just like you know, and then they're like one of the kids like, haha, that's what Peter says is gonna happen. And then they have these other lines about Peter like leaving, killing stuff and coming back and having issues with like memory loss and whatever. And like that totally just went right over my head as a kid. And as an adult, I was reading that and I was like, wow, this is terrifying. This is not like something where it's like, oh, this is my interpretation. Like they literally said that he kills people. Like it's in the text, it's right there. And I was like, okay, I want to write a story that takes everything in this book at the exact place it is within the book with roughly the same amount of chapters. And I'm just going to transfer it to a real world situation so that people can kind of, you know, experience the concept of the horror of Peter Pan the way that you experience it when you're reading it for the first time as an adult. And for like teachers or anybody who's like an educator is reading it, you can actually read it on a chapter to chapter basis and see how I lifted certain elements and like specifically kept them by chapters. You can read them side by side.
Oof.
I did not know that Peter Pan was like fairy tale true crime. That was not something I expected to learn today.
Oh man. Do you want to take a stab at answering about the what drew you to Alice? I mean, you've sort of talked already about, you know, the moment in which you came up with, you know, the idea for the book. I think
for Alice, this was a story that I've had a fascination with for a long time. I mean, I think that's why any of us write anything is to either interrogate something because we were fascinated by it or because we absolutely hate the way that it was done and we need to fix it, right? So I was fascinated with this idea of Alice in Wonderland. And also in coming into that whole, you know, oh, I get to be the hero. It's one of those things with being, you know, Black American where it's like, I don't have the stories and the connections to the myths, you know, because slavery did its thing, right? So I don't have that. So I have this canon that has been shoved down my throat since I was, early on. And it's like, these are my stories as much as they are the stories that belong to somebody else. It took me a while to realize this, because the people who told those stories and are still telling those stories in a way are doing it and saying that we don't belong, that they're not for us, that we should be on the outside looking in. And I was just like, no, we're not going to do that today. Her name is Alice, for one, because she is the main character. She is a Black Alice. She is the Alice that is supposed to be here. And you will deal with it. She's here now, and she's not ever going away again. So that was it for me. And I didn't want to retell the story of Alice in Wonderland, but I wanted to like borrow bits of the world and the fantastical nature of it, and how nothing makes sense except for the fact that nothing makes sense here ever at all. And Wonderland just seemed like the best place to play with this idea of how the subconscious can have a physical effect on the actual world, but with the nightmares rising out of fear and mistrust and anger and sadness and all of these, things that we have spikes of these when certain events happen in the world. So I have Alice physically fighting fears that affect her and her neighborhood and her people. So that's why I consider it more of a reimagining than a retelling. Because I have had some people get mad at me. It's like, this isn't a retelling. I was like, I mean, there's a girl who's Black with an afro and a leather jacket and diamond daggers on the front. What did you think was gonna happen, right?
Yeah.
So that was my foray into this. It was like, I'm gonna take the cover off of this book and I'm gonna wrap it around what I'm doing over here. Like that is how I approached it.
That's really cool. So we've got some questions from the audience. Thank you for sending those in. Let's start with, how do you approach building characters?
I actually have a really popular Tumblr post that's been floating around for the past 6 years, where I detail all of how you can design characters. But and I'll post that on the YouTube or something so people can see it. But yeah, I think it's basically structured down to what makes a human, kind of what are you built of, what do you like, what do you fear, what is your desire, what are you weak against, what are your goals, how would you develop, do you have any previous traumas, that sort of thing. And then I create one version of it that are the really basic, Buffy, she's traumatized because she has to kill demons. And then I have a slightly different one, she's traumatized because her family unit is crumbling. And then I'll have a really small one, she's traumatized by spiders. And I'll do the big one and the middle one and the little one for all of them. And then when you have that full breadth of information, you have a person who has multitudes, from the small things about them to the large things about them, through the way that they are now and the ways that they can become. And I'm very, very invested in that aspect of being a human being that is centered on development, because we are all in cyclical stages of development and static stages of development. And when you have characters that stay the same or hit a plateau, they stop feeling like people and they start feeling like cardboard cutouts.
I am not at all that deep about it. I'm kind of envious, because that sounds like a great way to approach it. And it sounds like it would save me so much time. Because I am not a plotter. I am a pantser, or a headlights writer, as I like to borrow from Danielle. Is I'll plan out a little bit and then I'll write to catch up. And then I plan out a little bit more and then I write to catch up. So I never know what's going on outside of this cone of light. And even then, sometimes it's foggy in the light, so I still don't know what's going on. So it happens the same way with my characters. I'll discover things about my characters as they are revealed unto me. I'll have a very basic understanding of, this is what she wants from this moment, or potentially from the whole book. This is what she wants from this person that she's interacting with. This is the relationship with the person. I wrote that fight scene. And just like in the book, Alice goes home and she runs into her mom, and her mom have this conversation. And that's when I found out that, oh, Alice's dad died. As sorry, I don't know if you can or can't hear them because they're right outside this time. But I didn't know that Alice had lost her father until her and her mom started talking about it 30 pages into the first draft. Those things I discover, and then I go back after it's all said and done, and I pull an outline out of it, and I pull this idea of the characters out of it, and there's stuff that I shave off of them. It's sort of like, doing an ice sculpture or just a general sculpture. You start shaving away the stuff that you didn't you thought you needed at the beginning, but no, it's just there and it's excess, and it becomes the fine details and whatnot, and eventually you have the sculpture of the whole person. And I find that discovering that sculpture and being surprised by it makes it so that people who are also looking at it later on, they're then surprised by it as well. So that's how I do characters. Is my characters never step into my head like fully formed, but as formed as I can conceive of them in that moment without seeing how they will interact with the world that I'm going to drop them in, and how they will interact with the other people that I'm going to drop them in. Because I might not know that they have a particular fear of something until, I make them face it. Or they run away screaming, which also happens. So I discover who my characters are. There was stuff that happened as I was writing book 2 where I was like, oh, I didn't, you and him, oh, okay. Like that was literally a thing that happened. And I'm sure everybody who has read book 2 knows exactly which point I'm talking about. Because when I wrote it, I just sat there for a second and I was like, well, hell, now I gotta go and figure the rest of this. Like my characters did that to me. So that's how I do character.
That's amazing. I'm gonna throw out one more specific question, one more general question from the comments, and then we have a couple that are specific to each of you. So I'll take turns. Okay. Y'all good?
Yes.
All right. So we got typically, do you have word count marks that you try to hit daily when you're writing?
No, I have ADHD, so that's not how I was built. I didn't come with that in the general packaging. I have to pay extra for that quality. I actually do a lot of the reason that I'm a plotter isn't because I'm like organized or anything. It's because if I don't, then I won't actually ever get anything done. So I actually just write a really tight outline, and then when I have roughly 3 months left before my projects are due, I like cram all of my writing into that period of time. So I think the most I've written in one day was like 10,000 words, but like that was exhausting. So yeah, for people who don't have that capability, you still get there if you try.
That's right.
I try. I call myself, being responsible and saying, I have 30 days. If I do 2,500 words every day, Monday through Friday, give myself days off, then I'll hit this goal. And then I play Smash Brothers for a week. Like that happens. Or the world implodes, So I don't ever, I'll start off that way, even though I know that it's not going to end that way. And then I'll have instances where, I'll be able to do that 2,500 every day. Or if it starts pouring out of me, I've had a few instances where I've had like 3 or 4 10,000 day words in a row, and then I'm useless for the rest of the month. You don't ask me for nothing. It's not going to happen. I can barely compose text messages at this point. Like my brain is slush. So I don't have a set method. I have tried to develop a habit around it. I have my habits that I do before I sit down to write, but the word count goal, unless a deadline like you said is looming immediately right there, nah.
I think it's good for people to hear that, because I think that I really appreciate NaNoWriMo because it sort of sets, goals for people. But I was always one of the people who, when I was writing, would like fall behind day by day and be like, oh no, I'll never catch up. Like, it's good to know that there are, the pros and cons to the word count method, and that there are that people get by both ways.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll start with an easy question for Elle from the specific questions. Where did Elle get her shirt?
I got this shirt from Torrid, actually. I have 3 Sailor Moon shirts that I got from Torrid, and then a couple of them that I actually got from Target. You know, they randomly popped up. I probably because Sailor Moon Crystal happened, but that's where I got this one specifically. But they are available at Target, probably at Hot Topic. I haven't been one of those in forever. But yeah.
All right, you heard it here first. All right, for Kayla, we have, I'd like to know about this adult thriller coming from Kayla.
Ooh, okay. This is like a Twitter question. So somebody follows my Twitter asked this. But I think a year ago, I was talking really angrily about how there aren't a lot of books that are specifically about women between the ages of like 45 and like 65, that there aren't a lot of like main characters that are from that age range who have, like doing like fantasy stuff or doing, cool thriller stuff, and how obsessed I am with the idea of creating that representation, because my grandmother was just like such a badass. She was so cool. She was really into like action movies and like Western thrillers and like slasher films and whatever. And when she was passed, like on her deathbed, I would go to the nursing home and watch these movies with her. And then outside of our door, the nurses would be like, "What's all that noise?" And one of the last movies I watched with her was Mad Max, and she saw the characters, the Bubulini, who are all older women, probably in their 70s, who ride dirt bikes and like shoot people with rifles. And she was just like crying. And she was like, "I've never seen anything like that before." And I was like, "I will give you the representation you need." Like, I was so touched and very upset. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to write a book about a woman who's in her 50s or 60s, and I'm going to make it really, really cool. And I came up with this idea for a spy thriller about a woman who works for kind of a James Bond-esque, like, corporate espionage sort of agency, who forcibly retires people at age 60 to do desk work and then permanently retires them at 65. But there's like a caveat where if you don't want to do desk work, you can do both the like worst and most violent and also the least like important cases that they have. So basically just throwing bodies at this, smaller problems. And she's like, I want to be in the field. I don't want to do desk work. That's not the kind of woman that I am. And signs this contract to do these works. And I want it to be a 5-book series. And I want to have it be each year until her permanent retiring, as the case like more and more intense. And I really want to focus on, the metrics of fighting when you're smaller and like more fragile, and how you can still, figure out ways to defend yourself. And, that her history of being this like James Bond type character has people both fear and respect her instinctively, as opposed to viewing her as like, regular, basically. So I am working on that. I just started writing it, just finished the outline for the first book, and I'll probably be done with that by like fall of next year.
Oh my goodness. Is my only response to that. Amazing. All right, so we have for Elle, with the third Nightmareverse book coming, is that the conclusion of Alice's story? Will there be more fun times in the Nightmareverse?
Well, I know for a fact that there will be more fun times in the Nightmareverse because we get a prequel, which was announced. And it's not, everybody's like, "Oh, is this back with Addison and such before the war?" And I'm like, no. Sorry. It's still after the war, but it's set in late 1880s Whitechapel, London. And these murders are happening. And word reaches a dress shop in St. Petersburg, Russia, where the Duchess so happens to be. That's like the Looking Glass pub is Hatta's Gateway. This dress shop is Duchess's. And so she's like, "Oh, the reason that people can't find the man who's committing these murders is because that's a nightmare. Let's go deal with that. Bodhi." And so her dreamwalker is named Baudelaire, and she goes by Bodhi for short, and they go to Whitechapel, London to find out what is going on. And this was a short story in an anthology called Wonderland, an anthology out by Titan Books. You can go and get it now. and read the story. It's called What Makes a Monster. And so this follows that, what's happening, that prequel. We get to see other characters, we get to see old faces, we get to see new faces. I will tell you a secret about all of my writing. If I write a short story, it's part of a larger world that I do have a plan for a book at some point in it. So take that with however you want to take it. Go read other short stories and other anthologies. There's a book connected to that somewhere that could be revealed at any point in time. And also, whenever I do finish a book, because I can't contain worlds and stories, I always leave outs for myself to do spin-offs or to do to go back in and find something else. Like A Crown So Cursed will end this trilogy, but Alice's story could very well continue. It could then follow the Tweedles. It could then follow Haruka and Romy. It could go any direction. We still haven't met the Dreamwalker and the Guardian from the Southern Gateway. Like, there's all sorts of places that I could go with that. So we will be getting Bodhi and Duchess. As far as other Nightmareverse books, I could go in a million different directions. I contain multitudes.
It's very true. The other anthologies that I know of Elle being in are A Phoenix First Must Burn.
Yes.
And what is it?
There's
Color
Outside the Lines. Which
yes.
A Phoenix First Must Burn has a high fantasy that I have been sort of concocting in the back of my mind. And I really enjoy it. And the story in Color Outside the Lines follows a Black superhero who makes her debut protecting protesters after, unarmed shootings of Black people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she does. Did not anticipate that being as relevant as it is right now. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so you could go and read those stories, and books about them are in my brain, somewhat on paper.
There we go. All right, for Kayla, we have, what Peter Pan book is this? And I think this could refer to one of two things. One of them could be, which is the Peter Pan book where all of these like weird, like, true crime fairy tale things are happening. It could also mean, just repeat again, what is the name of the Peter Pan book that you are writing? So let's do both of those.
All right, so the Peter Pan book that I'm writing is called Darling. And it is coming out, I think, next year, I believe in like the late summer.
Yeah, I think it's spring, sometime in spring, summer, yeah.
Okay, yeah, spring, summer. And the book is actually the original book. I know he did this weird thing where he wrote like 3 of the books and then wrote a play and then, did the play to book format. But this one is like generally considered to be like the first book, and it's called Peter and Wendy. And it's basically just like the Disney movie, but a book. It's not like a special version of it. It's the Peter Pan book.
Yeah, that's wild. All right, so our last question here is for Elle, but I think I'd love to hear an answer from both of you. In reference to publishing paid me, parentheses, fabulous job to Ellen Tochi on that, by the way. What are you hoping for from publishing in the future?
So much. So much. I am cautiously optimistic that we'll get it. Not because I don't believe in the people in the industry who are doing the work, just because I am dealing with not only, my own personal experience, but the lifetimes and the generations of people who've come before me, who have pushed for change, and we've gotten so much, and then people decide, all right, that's enough. No more for you. No more progression. No more equality. It's cut off right here. You'll get this and you'll like it. So having seen that, happen, I am cautiously optimistic. If we go back to the way things were beforehand, I would not be at all surprised. But I will say that there's something in the air now that feels just a little bit different, that gives me just a little bit more hope than usual. My goal, or my hope, and I'm fairly certain, actually I'm not fairly certain, I know for a fact that this is also Tochi's as well, is for publishing to come correct. just it's so easy to not be this way. Just stop. The things that you call tradition, you have to look back to why those traditions were formulated to begin with, how they got started. If it has racist roots, then it in and of itself is racist. The leaves of the tree with the racist roots will be racist, even though they are that, like the leaf at the top of the tree is the furthest from the deepest root, it's still going to be affected by it because it feeds it. Maybe an authors union. Don't know what that would look like. But I just want Black authors to get their due, both support-wise when it comes to, you know, push in certain things like the Tor article that I did about the commodification of Black pain, and for Black stories to be valued monetarily in the award circuit by libraries, to be seen as more than teachable moments, to be pulled out more often than on Juneteenth or during Black History Month. Black people exist outside of those specific times. So that's what I'm hoping, and that's a short list on a very long. That's just a short section of a very long list. I could go on and I could go on, but just do right by us. Like, it could be boiled down to just do right by us.
I agree with all of it. I'm in particular very excited for the idea of increasing the transparency in regards to how people are treated in regards to their like contracts and their advances and their, you know, percentages and stuff. I think that industries that have a little bit more transparency with that usually have like a little bit more equality, because people can kind of check and see what's going on, especially with some of the people who were kind of, you know, posting in it were talking about their like horror, people who weren't Black being literally horrified by what they got versus somebody else that they might even be a fan of might have gotten. And, you know, just that kind of, there was a very much like an energy of like despair, confusion, disappointment, you know, mutual horror with that tag, where people were kind of almost like in mourning for the people who they feel deserve to get something that they didn't deserve. And I feel like that an environment where that's the, you know, mutual feeling between both, you know, people of color, Black people in particular, and people who are not people of color, and people who are actually members of the establishment, all feeling that same kind of, you know, that it's more likely to go somewhere, as opposed to if, you know, it was something like, you know, somebody said, oh, I got this, and somebody else said, I got that, and everybody was mad. Like, there wasn't very much that kind of anger that's just like reactive anger. It was like anger for like the justification of certain behavior. So I feel like that probably is what makes this feel like it's going somewhere, because I feel like the transparency is becoming more obvious as a solution to a lot of this. Because internalized biases, like, you know, we can combat them, but transparency will make us see where we have these internalized biases. I'm also very interested in the idea of a like writers union. Having lived through the writers' strike where all of the TV just went away, that was a very interesting, like,
don't want all the books to go away.
I think it was in high school. Yeah, I mean, but that kind of like, there's something going on in regards to the way that people are able to live off of the work that they create. And one of the things that I've felt for years and years and years is that human beings consume stories and entertainment with the regularity and vitality as food. There's not a single day that none of us goes home and doesn't consume a story, whether it's something we're laughing at on Twitter, or a movie that we're watching, or fan fiction that we're reading who was built with love for us by our peers. Like, that's something that's just like an integral part of the human condition. And I think for like television writing, there is very much like a discussion of, this is something that everyone uses. This is something that everybody does. This is something that everybody needs. Can we make a living wage to produce this vital service? And I think that a lot of the time people don't consider like entertainment to be a vital service, but it is. And I think that, you know, when it comes to writers having a little bit more guidelines about, you know, how we are going to be treated across the board, whether we are mid-list authors, indie authors, or, you know, like bestsellers, probably would be advantageous, not only for us, but also for the people who can create certain work. Like, it is not a coincidence or a mistake that all of the television now is exceptional and that there's so much of it that we can't even really concentrate on it. It's because people who wouldn't have been able to afford to go to those schools and to go and learn and to place their stories, like, you know, The Good Place or, you know, Superstore or what have you, that are really off the wall concepts that are funny and interesting that people actually want to see. They're actually being like, wow, I can make a living doing this. It's worth it for me to do this job instead of work at Walmart. So like, when we're able to figure out a way for people to really be able to rely on writing as a way to make a living, except for, you know, a select few, we'll be able to increase the quality overall of the work that we get to receive. And it's not a assumption about it. We actually saw it in other industries. So I'm very, very excited about the potential for a union.
Amen.
As a Black editor, that's a vision that both of those things, all of those things from both of you are very much a vision I can get behind. So we've reached the hour-and-a-half mark. We're thinking we're gonna end it here, but that doesn't mean you have to stop engaging with these wonderful authors. You can find Elle McKinney's A Blade So Black and A Dream So Dark wherever books are sold right now. You can pre-order A Crown So Cursed and her new biographic novel at this time. And you can also get her cereal box, Black Widow.
Yes.
Yes, you can get that now. And then for Kayla, you can find The Wicker King and The Way to the Stars wherever books are sold. Darling at the moment is not available for pre-order, but if you want to stay tuned and you have a Goodreads account, you can always follow that and follow Kayla. You guys want to say your social media so people can come find you?
Mine is Elle on Words, and that's like the magazine ELLE on Words. That's my Twitter. That's where I spend most of my time, just because I can scream about Sailor Moon and anime in short bursts. I am on other social media, but you can find that on my website, which is llmckinney.com, somewhere in the upper right-hand corner. I had to imagine it. But yeah, come join the shenanigans.
Kayla, what about you?
I am on Twitter as @Kayla Ancrum, my full name spelled out. I am also on Tumblr, though a little bit less these days, and my handle is kaylapocalypse.tumblr.com.
I like that.
That's awesome. All right. Like we said before, Juneteenth Book Fest, the live event ends here, but the fest goes on. Please look at other videos on this channel. There is a lot of good content, which I'm going to go right back to when we're done. Please support all of these Black authors, especially today, especially now. Pick up these books wherever books are sold and the books of the other panelists that you will no doubt go watch videos of. Thank you both so much for this conversation. And we'll see you all soon.
Bye.
Bye.